I suggest, as I was saying, I suggest we get started and then Mariah's on her way. She said she's almost here. And then we can make sure that we get her feedback on the minutes as well. All right.
I'm just going to make stuff up until Mariah gets here. I just want y'all to know that.
Make it up, document it. All right. All right. So I'll do the roll. Dick,
Here.
Cliff,
Cliff's on the phone.
He is here.
But he's
Okay.
here.
Cliff is here. Jeff,
Here.
Sid,
Here.
and we are waiting for Mariah. We expect her to join, but I will add later. Okay. We need a note taker for this session. I was going to ask Mariah. I think she's next in the rotation, but I will take. I'll do minutes this time.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So the matter of the minutes, I emailed out a couple of revisions of this. Mariah had a couple of questions on this. So again, like I said, we'll get to her questions. I want to make sure that we address those. I actually did go back to the recording about the question she asked regarding her point on whether there really was underutilization. So we can clarify that, but I will ask the rest of the group, do you have any edits or updates to the minutes?
No, let me just say, I read a corrected version of the minutes, and I did not have any corrections to that.
Okay.
That I think was posted this morning.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we will get back to that then when Mariah arrives so that we can address her questions. And she had 2 points that she had made over email. The first was her point on underutilization. She said didn't have to do with the Driscoll open classrooms. I went back to the recording and I realized that classroom comment actually happened before her utilization comment. So I had flipped those so I can update that. Again, I'll share that with her. The other feedback she had was, Dick, you had made a comment in the call, was that you said we may have overbuilt, but how is this if even if we did, how is it relevant to the override, was sort of the question that you had framed. And Mariah was concerned about the statement about whether there was actually overbuilding or not. So again, we can clarify that, but that was a statement that was made in the call. So we will get back to that. The next item on the agenda is Jeff, your beep analysis. Take us away.
Okay. So I had made some screen caps because I didn't know how to share the spreadsheet ahead of time, and hopefully some of that stuff made its way out.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt you. The next item was actually an update on the budget, but the document that was sent out was from Mariah, so I have skipped that as well. Oh, actually, hold on, Mariah.
Where would we be without Mariah?
Well, Mariah's here now, I think, so I just admitted her.
Oh man.
So we'll never have to find out.
No, I'm not going to be able to make stuff up.
Hey, Mariah.
Hi, I'm trying to figure out how to get the audio where I can hear it loudly.
Okay. So we were
Do you want to go back to the beginning then, Sadaf, or do you want to?
Yeah, let's go to the minute.
Okay.
So we did the roll call. Mariah, I'll just add you. I'm gonna take notes and do the minutes. We reviewed the minutes. Everyone else was okay with the minutes. I know you had 2 comments that you had made over email that I summarized for everyone on the call. The first one around your comment related to underutilization, that was then followed by a sentence related to Driscoll having 6 open classrooms and a question about the 7th room that Cliff was going to follow up on. That comment about Driscoll actually happened earlier in the discussion. I went back and I looked at the recording, so I see where it might have been confusing. I was trying to consolidate some of it, and I think I inadvertently moved it to the wrong spot. So I can move that up to earlier in the minutes document where Cliff had reviewed the floor plans and put it in that section, which hopefully resolves your concern there. Is that?
Yes. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, that totally resolves it. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. And then you had a second question about the statement that Dick made, so why don't I let you address that?
Sure. So really I didn't understand the way it was written in the minutes. When I read it, it was different than I hadn't understood it like that in the meeting. But you're saying that's how it went in the meeting, which is fine. I haven't had the chance to look at it, but I do think if that's the case, then it's worth having a second, or I just want to make sure that we have the chance to maybe not, sorry, I'm very inarticulate and but basically I want us to have the chance to talk about that again at some point or look at it again in the report as we're developing our report, if that's coming up, because I think the data that I showed would perhaps not align with the assertion that the buildings are overbuilt.
Okay, well, it wasn't an assertion. It was in the context of what Cliff had been presenting, and I think it was in the context of we may have overbuilt.
Yeah, and that's, but the way I read it,
So
that's sort of the, like, so I guess that's my question, is just making sure it doesn't show up in the report as like the buildings
okay,
are
no,
overbuilt.
I think my understanding is that this is a topic that Cliff is circling back to.
Okay,
The utilization and so forth.
okay, in which case, yes.
I think a statement that the town overbuilt ultimately becomes a subjective one, as well as, it comes back to how the school committee and the school department are dealing with class size options and utilizing their buffer zones to the maximum capability.
Well, I don't want to get too far into it now if we didn't notice it. I just wanted to make sure we would get the chance to come back to this like question if it was something that the committee might make a claim about.
So in the context of the minutes, and if this wasn't clear and a different wording is better, the statement was, after discussing just the context was Dick said, okay, we may have overbuilt, but what does this mean in the context of an override? It was kind of a transition sentence that was, hey, yes, there's some extra capacity, and then what would we do with that? What does that mean? So I didn't hear it as a definitive, everybody agrees there's like an overbuilding and this is what the committee is saying. If that's how it was read, I don't think that's not what happened in that call. It was in the context of the discussion. So I don't know if other people read it in that way in the minutes, but
And I would think that anything that is going to appear in the final report is going to be looked at by everybody. So
right.
Again, I'm fine with letting it go. I just wanted to say that, like, I think it deserves more of a discussion than that statement. It sounds like it's going to, so great.
okay.
All right, thank you. All right, so based on that, I will make the update to moving the statement around Driscoll's classrooms to the section on the floor plans, as I mentioned. So with that change, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the 1st of December?
So moved.
Second.
Great. All in favor, Dick,
Aye.
Cliff,
Aye.
Jeff?
I abstained since I wasn't there.
Oh, yes, you weren't there, Mariah.
Yes.
Sid.
Yes.
Great. Minutes approved. Okay, great. Now, the next item on the agenda was originally going to be on the budget, which obviously was moved out to a different date. We are working with, so just to make sure everyone is on the same page. Mariah, I had Nicole post the statement that Superintendent Wong made at the last school committee meeting. So that is available for the public if they want to take a look at it, give some additional context as to why we're not discussing the budget tonight and why it wasn't covered in the school committee meeting on the 4th last week.
Thank you.
And yeah, no problem. And so the budget will be covered in the next school committee meeting, which is going to be December 18th. What we'd like to do as a subcommittee is then to meet on the 19th, which I realize is tough because it's a Friday, so there isn't going to be an evening meeting. We would need to find some time during the day. But it would be our last opportunity to do that before January. So Nicole did send out a doodle poll to see when people would be available to make that work on Friday the 19th. Based on that, I propose that we cancel the meeting that was originally scheduled for the 17th because it'll basically be rescheduled for the 19th. Does that make sense to everybody?
Say that one more time. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Sure. So there was a meeting that was scheduled for the 17th, which is a
Yep.
Wednesday evening.
Yep.
And because we won't have the budget then,
Oh, right.
right, so the goal is to actually review as a subcommittee after that budget has been shared. So we will book a time for the day, during the day at some point on Friday the 19th, which I realize, Jeff, might be tough for you. But
That probably is okay
okay, all
because
right.
things are going to start slowing down, around that time. And I don't have a lot of meetings during the day right now, so.
Okay, great. That's
So
great.
Can you just, if there was an email, I'm sorry, I'm driving, so I can't see any scheduling, but like, if we can't, is there anything would we have done, would we need the 17th for any other reason?
So the
Or
17th
has
was,
everything else been slotted?
yeah, so the 17th was supposed to be the beep analysis, which we pulled into this meeting. So we were able to swap that out. The 17th, the other things that have not been done, I don't think are ready. So teaching loads, Mariah, actually, let me pull this up. This is the revised schedule that I'm proposing, and we can, here we go. Can people see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great.
I can't just because I'm driving.
Okay, so I'll just
But-
read it out. Yeah, no problem. I don't want you to don't look at your phone. All right.
Slacker.
All right. So the beep analysis is today. The 19th is going to be the budget review with PSB. January 5th is the next meeting, so we'll be off for a couple of weeks, and that's going to be teaching loads. Mariah is what I have down to cover during that meeting. And just as an FYI, I can't make that meeting. And I also added to that because of the shift in the budget review conversation that we do teaching loads plus any follow-ups on the budget. So we need to confirm that PSB staff can make a meeting that week, or make that 1-5 meeting or shift it to another time. So that's an open question. On the 12th, I was proposing that we cover the middle school model that Sid and I have been working on. The 20th would be, which is shifted out a day because of MLK Day, is the out of district revenue opportunity. So I'm responsible for that. But Mariah, as an FYI, I'm still waiting for data from Dr. Schmuckler. I sent you an email about this earlier today as well.
I saw that. Thanks.
So that is assuming that I get that data soon-ish. The 26th, I was proposing the CLA response review. And for us to review the subcommittee report outline at that point. The 2nd of February would be the zero-based budgeting, potentially additional topics, overflow time. And then on the 9th of February, recommendations, synthesis, and discussion. So this is really what are we going to propose? How are we going to pull this together? I think some of this will start to come out, obviously, during the outline review. On the 16th, I'm proposing we review a draft of the document, but that is also President's Day week and is PSB February vacation. So I am going to be traveling during that week and will be unavailable. So I'm not sure what other people's schedules are during that week. Is that a viable week for this group to meet?
I have no idea. I haven't thought about anything past this week.
Me neither.
I'm still trying to figure out like where we're gonna get a Christmas tree, and hopefully Christmas is still on the 25th. Yeah, I don't. We have nothing planned for that week.
Okay. So like I said, I will be unavailable that week. We can do 2 meetings the following week. That's another option if the 16th becomes a problem. So I'm going to leave it on the 16th for now, and then we can revisit it as we get closer and people's plans solidify.
So Beth, can I make when you're ready, I wanted to make a request.
Sure. And then the final thing that I have on the timeline is on the 23rd of February, another review of the document, and the goal is to finalize it that week, or maybe we could probably do it the following week too if we needed to.
Okay.
But it's cutting it pretty close, frankly.
So we do it on the, if it would be the following week, it would be on the 30th of February, right?
Or yeah, March 3rd or whatever that is, second. I would love it if there was just squeeze a few more days in there.
All right.
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Maybe it's on the 5th. All right, but this doesn't seem to be leaning heavily into evaluating the budget request that the schools are going to present. And I'm just wondering how we're going to write a report that theoretically is going to talk about, an override and recommendations without having more focus on that specific issue.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear from people who have done this before around how much time. The way I was thinking about this was we'd do 2 meetings to deep dive on this and then do some offline follow-up. But maybe I'm underestimating. It's possible I'm really underestimating how much time that will take. In which case, I think we probably need to double up on meetings during some weeks, realistically.
Yeah, a question related to that is the initial timeline had us getting the initial budget request on the 4th of December and then having questions and having those answered over this time period that we're looking at here between the 4th and the 18th. And now we're the 12-19 budget review has watch the 12-18 school committee meeting and send questions to Mariah ahead of time.
Yeah, it's tight. If possible in there.
Yeah.
I agree that's not, that doesn't give anybody time to review the questions. I do think though that there's probably a list of questions that we could preemptively send, right? So one example of that is there is a question that had come up earlier in this process around the efficiencies that we had discussed, that had been discussed or proposed as part of the last budget review cycle in the spring. And so for the things that were not adopted, were those considered again or put back on the table? Why not? So that's one list of questions. And I know, Mariah, we discussed this before. I'm happy to sort of formally resend that if needed, but there's probably a list of questions like that. But I agree with you. I mean, it's tight. So I'm happy to adjust this. I'm struggling with the timeline and what we can viably get done.
No, it is. It's a problem. If we don't know in what detail we're going to see the budget on the 18th or the 19th. So
you're not going to see details. It's going to be an adjusted forecast. It's not going to be a full budget. The full budget doesn't come out until much, much later in the cycle. I think it's like the last week of January or first week of February. I can't remember what it's scheduled for, but it's quite some time from now.
So when you said an adjusted forecast, I mean, how much?
So it'll have the efficiencies, the 4 categories, which I'm sorry, the end of a long day, my brain can't process anymore, but the efficiencies, the things that we are putting back, the restorations, the recommendations, and I can't remember what the other thing is.
Like the
So
service baseline.
yeah, so the level service is one, and then it was adjusted, basically going to be adjusted up and down, and then the restorations and anyway, those four things. And there will be some level of detail, but not possibly not the entire level of detail on the dollar amounts and such for those adjustments. But it will not be like a budget includes like every single staffing position at every single building and like narrative accompanying that and so forth. It's like the book that we're used to. That will not be what is delivered on the 18th.
Okay.
Can I make my comment and question from earlier?
Make your comment, but just just a statement before that. If you have an example of what this might look like, I'm struggling to see that if it is really just a handful of line items, how we have a meaningful conversation about the budget without additional detail. Now, I don't think we need the full budget book to have a meaningful conversation, but it just depends on what the level of fidelity is. And I'm not, because I haven't seen it before, I'm unclear as to the viability of that conversation. So put that out there, and Mariah, go ahead and make your comment.
Okay. Let me come back to that after I make my other things. So
Okay.
one is again, I've sent that request to the state for the teaching load comparison data, but there's a good chance I expect I won't get it. So I just want to say like we're sort of in the mercy of people whose actions we don't control on that one, just to realistically set expectations there. And then the second thing is I would really, really, really like to see a draft of the outline of the report before January 26th. I think that to the extent we might need to modify some of our work, just, if there's any clarifications or anything else that come out from that, I think sooner is better on what that skeleton looks like. And I would love to see that in the context of, I think you had said you were going to collaborate with the other chairs on the skeleton outline. So seeing how the whole thing looks, I think would be really valuable as a committee member to understand the eventual product that I believe the committee basically will be asked to endorse. So my vote is for sooner rather than later on that.
So that sort of cuts both ways.
Right.
Say more. I don't know what that means.
Well, I mean, you're asking for sooner rather than later when 60% of the budget,
I'm asking for the headings. Like, what are the headings and the sections of this? Not anything written. That's all. So like, because there was something that Chaz gave to us that Sadaf said that I thought that she and the other subcommittee leads were going to modify. So to the extent we just get the modification of the headings, that's all.
So what we discussed was that we weren't in a position to revise our section of the report. It looks different for the other subcommittees just based on the nature of what they're doing. And my next step from the last conversation we had was to provide Chaz with the feedback that we wouldn't have anything until realistically late January, which he understood from an outline point of view, because that was the feedback that I received from this subcommittee on the 1st. And so I did pass on that feedback. And I think we can try to align the structures, but it is difficult when we don't really know what the thesis will be.
Okay.
So, I think I also like the idea of having an outline to work towards, but I also, as I mentioned also in the last call, I started to draft an outline a month ago. I didn't get very far. And then Chad shared his outline, and then we talked about whether we could do some refinement, and the feedback was that this group didn't feel comfortable doing that at this point because we don't have enough information. So I think, yes, it would be ideal, but I don't know that we're in a position to do that, Mariah.
Okay. Going back to the comment about whether or not there'll be enough information, the budget book that we have from last year will give you a pretty good sense of what is a quote unquote level service budget. And then you will see or I'll say what items are contained in a level service budget. And then you'll be able to see the adjustments to services that are going to be explained on the 18th. So I think those two things together will let us have a relatively useful conversation, but I could be I could be so far into the details of this that what seems like it's tractable to me might feel really overwhelming to other people, and I appreciate that.
So, it's a good point, Mariah. As long as the presentation sort of does show 4 different lines, that's so you can look back at what's level service and what's being, added back, and what's the, the wish list, and what are the efficiencies, so everything's sort of separate. I guess what I'm wondering is, at what point will your subcommittee be talking to the administration about what they are proposing? Because what happens in the end of January is that's when the school committee essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, but approves the first draft, if you will, and then it gets published like 2 weeks later.
No,
so,
that's the other way around.
Well,
Sort of. Well, I guess that depends on what you mean by talks about versus published, but go ahead.
well, let me start with my question. When will your committee be going through the proposed budget line by line with staff?
Well, we don't usually go through the budget line by line, but I think what we're going to do, which is what happened last year, is essentially the finance subcommittee will not do this as a standalone subcommittee. The activities that we do will get pulled in and merged with the main committee, because this is a question for the main committee. And so whether or not I chair or Val chairs, it will probably happen at full committee, or it will happen at finance subcommittee with all the members. And we'll need to, I'll need to caucus still with Bella and see how she wants to run this, because we had a different superintendent last year and she may have a very different approach to how the actual meetings run. Right now, we've just been focused on letting them actually get the information and the data, and not how we're going to explore what they have shared with us. So it's a great question, but I don't have the answer yet, other than I expect it's going to happen not just in finance subcommittee and not solely under my decision as to exactly how we do this, but in collaboration with the full committee chair and with Bella.
And I don't remember what the timing was last year, because I just gotten back.
Right.
And do you have a sense as to when those meetings will happen? Because
they're scheduled. They're scheduled already. Yes. So I do.
So that would be good for this group to know, so that we can plan on piggybacking those conversations and that due diligence that the school committee is going to be doing.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to. We have a whole planner for the year and everything's already booked, so I can pull those dates and share them.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah. Do you mind just one of you writing an email, because I'm not anywhere I can write anything down? Just like send dates. Okay, thank you. That I won't forget.
Thank you. All right, so then going back to the question around time. So Mariah, you said you weren't sure if you would be able to get the teaching load information on by the 5th.
I'm not sure I'll ever get it. It depends on the responsiveness of someone who has I have no ability to get them to respond.
I think based on, Dick, what you had found in the contracts, it does seem like we can get some of this information through publicly available contract information.
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah.
So that's an alternative.
We can, and we did already. I think Dick found for the same communities I did. I think the question was more broadly, and there's hundreds of school districts, and it requires them to be posted publicly. So I think someone could if you wanted to. It just seems like a lot of effort.
I mean, I don't think that I don't think that this requires hundreds of school districts. I think the question was more for, somewhere between 5 to 10 comparable communities. What else is being done? What does that look like for Brookline's comparable communities? That was the question as I had understood it. Does anyone else agree or disagree with that?
No, I think we had looked in a number of contexts at comparable communities and not at hundreds, but at a dozen or so, or 10. So what exactly did you, Mariah, did you ask DESI for? What are you waiting for them to provide?
Sorry, I was talking and on mute. What I asked MASC was if they had any data
I'm sorry.
beyond on the staffing model for communities, and they said they did not. But if we're really saying we just want to know the staffing model in our comparable communities, I think that's much more tractable. It might not be, again, it's sometimes like you need to understand some of the subtleties of the wording of it. But I think that's much more reasonable to pull if we're looking at like the small around 10 communities we're talking about. And in fact, we already have the information for 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, so that feels more straightforward, and maybe this was just a miscommunication about what the request is. But that was what I was expecting, was those comparable communities, and somewhere in that 10 to 12 range feels right.
Got it.
Okay. All right, so based on that, and because I don't think it's going to be a super long discussion necessarily, maybe we cover that on the 5th or try to, and then we keep the 5th or a meeting that week. I will reach out to Nicole to see about ensuring that we can get PSB staff to attend that, because I think the bulk of that conversation will need to be follow-ups from the budget review from the 19th. So I
Can you
think
do me a favor and I will manage the request about scheduling again, because there's
Sure.
some other stuff going on there that that I can tap into.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think based on where we land on that, I think we can shift some of the other conversations around and do additional conversations on the budget, or do multiple topics per meeting. It obviously means things will go longer, or we can have a second meeting per week to the extent that we need to. And I think we can evaluate that in 3 or 4 weeks as we get there. Unless, again, based on people's prior experience with this, we should just book these ahead of time. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Jeff, Dick, Cliff, you guys have all done this before.
Can I ask a question about this, a secondary question about process, which I'm still a little.
Sorry, let me just get an answer to this question so we can close it down.
But it ties into the question you're asking. I guess, like, is the process that these committees do not only their subcommittee, but is there like a capstone where we vote the whole report?
Yes, they're supposed to be, and
Yeah.
that hasn't been scheduled. Yeah.
That's right.
And at least back in 2014, I mean, there were many more subcommittees, and each subcommittee did a report and did a presentation to the group, and then the group, asked a lot of questions and then voted on each individual subcommittee report.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I would expect that that's something we're gonna have as well.
Yeah, we didn't do that in 2017, but as everyone remembers, that was a much more compressed and smaller override study committee. So there were, I think, 3 subcommittees, but effectively we just munged the 3 reports together into the final report. There really was no subcommittee reports that year.
So then that would really need to be done at the very end of February or going into early March. It's not.
Yeah, I thought Chaz had mentioned, or someone had mentioned something about the macro level flow, just like we're talking about, but I can't remember, and maybe that has changed as some of the data has pushed out a little bit. But I do think, to what Cliff was just saying, I think we had originally said we were looking more to do something along those lines, right? With subcommittee reports and then some onesie twosie higher level pieces that weren't covered.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the report draft outline and kind of yeah, so in Chaz's outline, there's a conclusion that's basically written sometime in February. And let's see, the final deadline for the select board to transmit a ballot is actually March 31st. So his goal is to have a final report no later than Friday, February 20th, to allow that, which I think is not realistic. I've told him we have an outline at some point in January. It just, um,
At least he didn't say November.
that's true. All right. So look, if people would like to book multiple meetings per week now, I'm happy to do that. I would prefer not to do that at this point. My preference is to say that we will do follow-ups on the budget. We'll double up on our topics if we need to, and then we'll schedule additional meetings to the extent that we have to. And we evaluate as things progress.
Yeah,
I agree.
the other thing that we can be reevaluating is actually what we want to write about and whether or not we want to focus a little differently than what we've been considering. I mean, some of what we're doing is honestly just because we got no numbers to look at, so we're filling time. And as it goes along, there may be things that we say, there's really nothing here for us to spend a lot of time on. So let's just either eliminate it or, write a paragraph or two and just, focus.
Yeah, that's fair.
One issue that has been nagging for me, and I unfortunately had another engagement this morning, so I could not listen to what was presented to the select board. But my understanding is it was simply a forecast for FY27. I don't know whether anybody on this subcommittee was able to listen into the select board meeting. But it was not a 3-year forecast. My understanding is that what will emerge on the 19th, the 18th for the school committee and the 19th for us is not a 3-year forecast. It's a 1-year budget forecast. And I may be mistaken on that.
No, it's a 3-year.
So, you'll have a 3-year. Okay, good.
What got presented this morning was 5-year
okay, good.
financial forecast.
Good.
Which is pretty daunting.
Okay. Forget what I just said.
All right. So I'm gonna leave this as is. I'm gonna leave teaching loads on the 5th, Mariah, with you, assuming you'll be able to find this data online publicly. I'm looking for somebody to chair the meeting on the 5th. Any volunteers, any takers?
It means I don't have to take notes. I'll volunteer.
All right, excellent. Done. All right. All right, good. All right. If there is nothing else, then we will go over to Jeff. Jeff, take it away.
Cool. So we started right before Mariah joined with that. I had sent out a couple screen caps, just because we needed to get something posted. I'm gonna use the spreadsheet just because I think it's easier to zoom in and out, and then if there's something that we want to tweak real time, then we can do that. So there's I'll start with sort of the top thoughts. I looked at both BEEP itself and then also the extended day. So you'll, and please jump in and ask me questions and all that as we go. It's always more fun when it's a little more interactive. This is cut off a little bit, but not much. So when we had originally talked about BEEP, and I remember specifically Dick asking, "Oh wait, are we talking about extended day or are we talking about full day?" And Mariah and I are both like, "No, we just want full day." And then of course, once I started looking at it, I realized, "Oh no, we really need extended day too." So the original BEEP, as I understood it, was more of a 8 to 12 type of a program. And then when we moved to the full day, they added a couple hours on to match it to the normal PSB K through 8 school day. The extended day then goes from there on. It's not offered at all of the locations, but we will talk a little bit about that on the second page. What I then tried to do is to do two things. One is to try to make heads or tails of this table. So the table over here, this little screen cap, this was out of the memo that you guys may have remembered that we talked about a million years ago that sort of describes how BEEP works. And what I did is pull that into this table over here. Everything that's in white is essentially straight out of the table. And then the pieces that are green are things that I calculated. And then the pieces that are this whatever salmon color, they're in the table, but I think they're actually calculated. I've looked at this thing like 20 times now, and I still can't quite exactly figure out this column D. But to make the numbers add up, it can't include this, otherwise they would miss. Sorry, column I. This is the totals, which, as you can see here, the sum for how many kids are actually in BEEP is actually this full IEP column plus the financial aid column, and then the full tuition paying column. And so that ends up being what the formula is, essentially to get to the total. So what I was really trying to figure out in both the full-time BEEP as well as the extended day, was whether or not, what really made sense as far as costs go versus how much we were bringing in, and then into that philosophical question, right? Of like, what do we really want to be doing with BEEP? Is this something we want to be making money on? Is this something that we want to be breaking even on? Is it something we want to be taking a loss on because we're serving, well, we're legally serving kids that we need to be serving that are on IEPs, or do we want to serve kids that can't pay for preschool somewhere else in Brookline when we know that preschool has been proven to be a great way to, it is a big indicator of future goodness, we'll put it that way. And there are people that know way more about that than I do. So at the end of the day, though, if you look at the numbers, and the law is that we need, if we have kids in BEEP that are on IEPs, we need to have 50% ratio of total number of kids in BEEP in the Brookline, sponsored preschool, to essentially create this inclusionary environment where we have a 1-to-1 ratio between kids on IEPs and kids that aren't. Usually the suggestion, as I understand it, is that you want the ratio to be a little higher, as in you want a few more kids that are not on IEP, because that'll give you a little bit of a buffer in case the next year you get a few more kids that enroll, or kids that go on to IEPs that weren't on, or whatever. And then you don't have to scramble to try to figure out, like, well, what are you going to do to make all that work? So if you just peel out the numbers, though, in this column G, and this is from school year 24-25, so not this year, but last year, and you can see it over the last 4 years. The ratio is actually pretty low, i.e., we have a lot more kids in the program we need to legally to meet the inclusionary goal. So that sort of jumped out at me as hey, BEEP has become a much bigger program than is required by law, which again, to my earlier bits, could be okay if we're in the business of trying to, make money on BEEP or whatever it is. It's just a data point. So the hard part from there is trying to then peel out exactly what we're spending on BEEP from what I would think of as a salaries and a benefits standpoint. This I just copy and pasted this data from the memo that Mariah received, which everybody, again, not that one. Oh, sorry, the Zoom thing. Oh, go away, Zoom thing. Hold on. There we go. This memo that just sort of says, here's the all-in estimated program cost. It's written a little bit more in where are all, from my perspective, where is all the funding coming from? And it's less as in not written in the standpoint of like, this is how much it costs to run BEEP. There's 15 teachers and they all have this salary or, aggregate salary. They all have these benefits, aggregate. And then if there are other costs that are associated with running it, whether it be building costs or however you want to bookkeep it. So I wasn't able to really come to the real punchline-y piece where I wanted to essentially say, okay, are we are we breaking even? Are we losing money? What are we doing on this? So that and that sort of comes to that question of, can we figure it out that way? Now, when we talk extended day, we do have that information, or it was provided. This is how much the salaries are, this is how much the benefits are, and that gives us a more classic, this is how much it costs, which then we can go through, and we'll talk about this in a second, based on what we're pulling in tuition, are we actually covering those costs? So, I think unless we can come up with a number, and then we can back in, like, based on what tuition we're pulling in, it's actually covering it. It seems to me that it makes more sense to reduce the overall size of BEEP, to make it smaller, to be more based on, we know how many kids in general are on the IEPs or estimate, and then increase that ratio. It doesn't make sense for me based on the current sort of capacity of what exists in Brookline today for daycare and that sort of thing, for us to want to make this some sort of revenue generating program. At the same time, given the costs that are going up from teachers and salaries and benefits, it feels to me like this makes more sense to be let's reduce the program and make it come closer to what we need to do from a legal mandate, which more than likely is going to, save us money. So it's more of an expenditure side than a revenue side. But let me pause there before we talk.
So there are a bunch of
Extended
hands
day.
raised, and I have some questions as well.
Oh yeah, there are lots of hands raised. All right, let's
Yeah,
pause.
Sid,
Sorry, I was looking over
Mariah.
here. I wasn't looking over here.
Yeah, no, totally. Sid, Mariah, then Cliff, and then I'll chime in.
Thanks for presenting this data. I had a quick question. You said per law need 50%. I just want to clarify, is it that you need at least 50% of the classroom that it does not have an IEP to be classified as a special ed or as a early childhood program? Or just could you clarify that metric?
I'm gonna try, and then Mariah's gonna correct me. So the way I understand it is that as we have a legal requirement to provide early education for kids on IEPs, we can't just have a classroom that's all the kids on IEPs, right? So by definition, we need to have at least a 50-50 ratio of kids that aren't on IEPs in the program to make it legal. Obviously, we can have more, but we can't have less than that.
More you can. So like a classroom with 5 kids with IEPs and 20 kids who don't have IEPs. I mean, wouldn't that be the desired like integration in kind of the least restrictive environment? Or am I misunderstanding the?
It's just, you asked the question about the law. the law says it has to be at least a 1-to-1.
Right.
That's what the law says.
At least is that is
I'm not sure that that's the law. I
Yeah.
don't know where the
Thought it
law
was.
is. I don't know if it's 50%. I thought it was closer to, and again, I don't know if this is like law is I don't want to say it's law versus best practice versus guideline. Like, I don't know which of these things it is. Now, there is, as far as I know, like 60 to 75% students who do not have disabilities in the total pool of students is sort of like the sweet spot. I don't know if 50% is the threshold. In the memo that we were given last year, this, which is I think where you're coming from at this, Jeff, it said 50 to
Yep.
75%, but I don't know where the 50% number came from.
Okay.
And I certainly wouldn't take it all the way up to the line because of what you said, Jeff, about needing to essentially leave capacity in place for future IEP students to be able to join so that they have a community. To be a truly inclusive classroom, it needs to have a community of non-disabled peers.
Got it. Okay. I can do some more research on that.
Yeah,
find
if
out
there's
what
like
that number is.
yeah, a link to the
I'm-
statute or the regulation.
Or whatever. Maybe it
Because
isn't a law.
I guess the
but-
only reason it's important just to kind of so
That's
as
how I
we
understood
tweak the
it.
numbers or figure these numbers out, I don't want that to be like a limitation on what's possible.
Sure. We can dig into that. No problem.
I took my hand down, or Zoom took my hand down. I'm putting it back up. Sorry.
I was gonna let Sadaf call
Yeah, I'm
on
just
who was
saying
next, 'cause I
Zoom, I
couldn't-
don't know if I'm next or not. I'm
wasn't-
just saying
I wasn't
Zoom.
watching, so I
Zoom
don't know
took
who
me
was
down.
next.
Mariah
So-
was next, and then it was Cliff. That was the
Okay.
order of
Okay.
when people raised their hands.
I was just going to add maybe a little bit of shades of gray to some of what Jeff said, which is generally research shows that participation in preschool, no matter where it is a public good in that it essentially establishes the foundation for early literacy and all the things you need to be a good learner later on, all the way through your academic experience. And so there is certainly a strong rationale for accessibility of preschool broadly. However, I will say that although historically in Brookline there was not sufficient preschool capacity, which I think led to a lot of the growth in BEEP, it is not clear to me, given the adjustments that have been made in more recent years, the reductions that have been made in the waiting lists for BEEP, underserved, that we have been underserved for preschool. I'm not sure that that's true anymore. On the other hand, I think that there is a community here, which is children who are low income, who may not be necessarily being given the full financial, their adults may not be given the full financial aid that they need to be able to join some of these other for-profit preschools. Some of them offer scholarships. I don't know to what extent they fully meet the need of the adults that care for the children. And so I think that PSB, we can't just think about it as, in my opinion, because again, there is a net positive to the system as you think about, like, maybe not immediate return on investment, but long-term return on investment, making sure that students have this foundational support in their early childhood going all the way through. So do we need BEEP at the scale that it is? Probably not. Should we make sure that students with disabilities and low socioeconomic status students in their earliest years are getting access to preschool? Yes, we should, because not only is that good for them, but that is good for the town in the long term. So that's just my framing of Jeff's math.
So, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna hold my question. Cliff?
Yeah, so my comment is a little bit along the lines of what Mariah said. And I think it also, if you go down that path of wanting to provide as many scholarships as possible for folks who can't afford early education elsewhere, or preschool elsewhere, then I think that tends to move you in a direction of having a larger program and charging people who can afford it so that they can subsidize the ones who can't. And let me just say that, BEEP has helped in the last couple of years, the public schools of Brookline and hence the town meet their budget needs by having money in the revolving fund that they were able to use for certain expenses that freed up money elsewhere. And I think Mariah's right in terms of philosophically where the community probably goes, but I also do not think that the town and the public schools can afford to operate at a loss. We're going to be providing that service.
Can I add to that though, that what your statement says presumes that that the revenue paying students are actually covering their costs. And I think if you look at just, for example, we only have truly broken out, but I think we could probably figure out the math a little bit more on what's happening on the dollars that are here. My guess is that when you count in benefits, the tuition paying students are not covering costs either. So they're still operating at a net loss per student.
Well, okay, so that gets back to the entire question of, what's the market? And that is sort of like how I always started this discussion based upon what we were told a few years ago. And I don't know what a break-even analysis is here at all. I'm not suggesting actually that we're able to get there, but I do know that BEEP has, if the revolving fund was having money accumulate, then sort of by definition, unless, well, maybe not, because the benefits are being paid elsewhere.
Exactly, right.
All right, so, well, then we need
And Cliff, I would add to that,
Yeah.
for those of us who are maybe around season 9 or 10 of this show, like you and I, and maybe and Dick, a couple other people, if at one point the benefits for BEEP were charged to the revolver, and that got changed at one point. So that, and this might be tying with the increase in the size of the revolving fund, is essentially the benefits are no longer being charged back to the revolver, and so the revolver is accruing funds. But it just makes the whole thing that much more messy to detangle in terms of truly whether it's break even, whether it's profitable, whether it's at a loss.
And that's why one of the reasons why benefits are being suggested to go below the line, as opposed,
but even below the line, unless they're charged directly to specific accounts.
Well,
but
if you have it below the line and you then are able to be, when you're budgeting, you're actually seeing the cost, then you're going to think about it. And I don't see why they can't or shouldn't be charging the revolving fund. It doesn't change your point or Jeff's point that maybe the tuition paying students are not covering. I guess the question becomes, if they were paying market, would they cover? And if you eliminated them, but still had to come up with a 1-to-1, plus you wanted to provide scholarships, well, you're going to be losing a lot more money because you're still going to have all those teachers and you're still going to be paying those folks benefits. So we kind of like need to do that sort of an analysis and understand what is the best financially for the town, fiscally, that also meets the philosophical preferences of the school system. I personally don't think it's going to be cutting back.
Right. I think so. That's a good segue into the comment that I was going to make. I have a lot of skepticism that cutting back the program is going to be the right thing for the community. I mean, people struggle to get daycare, preschool spots, and there actually aren't. It's probably changed a little bit since my kid was in preschool. She's only 7, so it wasn't that long ago. But there were limited preschool, viable full-day preschool options in Brookline, and we continued to drive my kid to preschool in Cambridge for years, which was highly inconvenient because of those limited I have a question around demand for this. And then obviously we don't have this break-even analysis. I think that's an important question. The question about salary information for BEEP staff. I mean, I think you can get that from DART. When I was poking around some other things, there was some data in there for BEEP staff and compensation, unless you're looking for something.
No, I'm just looking for, how many people, how many staff do we have? Are there teachers? Are there paras? We know that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 locations, right? And this is sort of a bit of a scratch page, but the BEEP annual report listed out a lot of the data, right? There were 24 classrooms, there were 4 preschool, but that's like, that all comes, based on the numbers that they had. I was coming up with that there were a ton of employees, right? And similar to the questions that we were talking about earlier about, we have how many schools and the buffer zones and what are we doing from capacity utilization. All of BEEP isn't in one space, so we can take these 200 kids, 283 kids, and chop them into 20 kid chunks or 10 kid chunks or whatever the ratio is. But again, like, without having that exact data, it's really hard to come up with how much are we actually spending on BEEP to then allow us to back into, okay, well, based on the revenue now, and then some of these other pieces like the grants, and the capital fund, which I'll admit that I don't actually know what that is. How does it all work through? And we just don't have enough info to get that right now.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably get some of that information from the DESE website and make some estimates, which will just be that. But I mean, I get the concern. I mean, do you have a path to get some of that incremental data? Is there a way to get that in a way that, do you have a path to do that?
Oh, poor Mariah's already chatted with me like 3 times on this, so I hate to ask her again. But
No,
I
we can
always
do
ask
that.
her again.
We can do that. And we can I mean, it's not impossible. The data that you see essentially is broken out in the budget book. So, and a lot of the math here is run, let's say, on averages. We know what's going on. So you and I, Jeff, might not be able to get it to like $10,000 accuracy, but we could definitely get it to $100,000 accuracy, or maybe closer, which would,
Great.
again, we could go to staff, but I'm just saying, but knowing that their time is limited, we could probably approximate really closely.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
great.
pretty good.
That would be awesome.
All right, so I lost track of who raised their hand when. I think Sid was next, and then I think it was Mariah, Dick, and then Cliff.
And I don't know if I was next, but I just wanted to follow up on the budget discussion. What background or backup do you have, Jeff, for the numbers that are in the lower left-hand corner? The
This part?
what was the, yeah, where did that come from, and how?
Unfortunately, that was just, it was just from this memo. That's it.
Okay.
Which,
and we don't know how that. Mariah, to what extent do we get reimbursed for students that are on IEPs, if at all?
So the students, my guess, but I would have to confirm this with staff, is that the students who are in BEEP, none of them are reaching the threshold for circuit breaker reimbursement, but that would have to be a question. But I would guess, based on the fact that they are in district, that they are likely not, or very few of them are eligible for circuit breaker reimbursement.
So essentially, regardless of where you put the students, this is out of pocket.
I'm trying to think if we have any other program that I would think of as a reimbursement. I mean, obviously there's like some grants we have, but I can't think of any that.
Yeah, it shows 210,000 out of a $9 million.
Yeah, exactly. It's not.
For grants.
It's not moving the needle very far.
Okay.
Now oh, sorry, I don't know if I'm next.
No, Sid was actually next. So
Sure, I have a couple of other questions. I was thinking, what is the total number? What is the max on the total number of BEEP students there can be? Is there a limit or? I guess that's the first question. The second question is, I think you presented this in another slide, but just how many increases in tuition have occurred over the past few years? I'm just kind of curious about tuition raises and if there's possibility to raise tuition further for next year.
I'm defer the first question to Mariah because I think that's based on capacity. And so I know recently, right, we had not had space. Classically, we had deep classrooms in all of the K through 8s, and then they slowly got moved out to some rentals, but they've almost all come back, but not quite. And there'll be some going into Pierce. But I think that's sort of the max, right, of space where we can put the number of, or that'll back us into the number of kids that would be max, unless we wanted to then go back to renting more space again, like we did before.
Yeah, I would just add that the BEEP strategic plan a couple of years ago articulated a goal to return pre-K into the K-8s, which is where it had historically been before the enrollment boom. And that has been slowly happening. And if you recall, BEEP was using Clark Road for a couple of years, and then we got rid of the Clark Road lease, and those BEEP classrooms are now like slowly returning into the buildings. And as Jeff said, Pierce is the next building that will be, it had lost its BEEP classrooms due to overcrowding, and the new building is being built with BEEP classrooms.
Right, right. So thank you. The tuition piece, which I actually have a little bit of sort of markety type data to, Cliff has mentioned that a couple times. So the current tuition for BEEP was 15.5, and I think I may.
Is it on your comps tab?
Oh, I thought it was. It's got to be in here. Yes, here it is. So maybe just a quickie, but actually, Cliff, did you want to ask anything before I talk real quick on this one?
No, I was just gonna, make the point, and this is much for Mariah and the school committee as it is for the folks here, but
Yep.
the type of information that we're looking for, with respect to the town, the detail that the town puts out for revolving fund information it's extraordinarily detailed. You can take a look, you can see the salary lines, you can see everything they've spent on anything. And I just would encourage the school committee, and maybe it's because they're on OpenGov or they're using Munis, whatever, but to get to the level of transparency that I know the community wants, and I would expect the school committee itself would appreciate, there needs to be, a different platform needs to be used. You need to require that this sort of data gets put in a format that people can understand and people can look at, particularly you. It's for you guys to be flying as blind as you are when you take a look at what you can see on the town side. It's nuts. Anyway, off my soapbox.
Okay, well, hey, that's a good segue to market values. So this spreadsheet or table comes from this memo, which I think we sent around. I copy and paste a lot of this stuff so I could easily refer to it. But this is essentially some comp data that came from some private schools and also a few public schools that were in obviously not in Brookline, including a double up of Wellesley, which was also into the calculation, but I'll let that one. That's my soapbox. Is that there's so many things where it's just like somebody never double checked this. But at any rate, what I was thinking was, and this is a little bit wide to look at, so let me kind of run you through what I was thinking. It's really hard to come up with a apples to apples comparison for daycare costs or anything where you're sending your kids, because they all have different days, they all have different hours, they all have different months that they run. So if you look at, the apple orchard school and you see, oh, look at that, $21,000. That's not too bad. That's pretty close to Sewell, and it's pretty, it's not that much more than Beep, right? But they're only open from 8 to 12, right? So I tried to unravel all of this and unwind it all into just a daily cost per hour. Because then at least we could apples to apples and say, oh, well, it turns out that Apple Orchard is actually $23 an hour, which is the most expensive by far daycare that we got the comps for. To add on to that, I then tried to layer and feather in the extended day costs. If a school had an extended day available, most of the time, not all of the time, actually in this data, it's 50-50, so forget what I just said. Some schools will allow you to pay per hour. Some schools will just say, if you want to do extended day, you have to pay for extended day, and there's just a flat fee for that. But they also publish the hours so you can untangle it. So I put that in for Clinton Path. I put that in for Beep. And then again, I sort of ran that out. The cost per hour when you include extended day starts to fall apart a little bit, because then you have to peel out again how many months they're open, and sometimes they have summer programs that change what you can do. So it's really, really hard to get apples to apples. And I also started to do my own research on these locations, and of course you have to remember that you usually pay a different tuition based on the age of your kid. So I'm assuming that in the memo that all of these costs were based on a child that was the same age across all of them. I didn't have a chance to go back and say, basically break out this chart for usually there's 3 or 4 strata of ages of kids and how much it's going to cost, right? So long to short, with all of its warts, what I put together was this column, which it's as good as I can come up with now without, teasing out and, all the stuff that I just said, all the dependencies. Beep comes in at 11.65. This is just for tuition, not for extended day. 11.65 an hour. You can see it's under market by quite a bit from the other schools. I was curious, and I don't know if Mariah, you know this, but the Sewell Early Childhood Center looks to be, to me, a Brookline thing.
It's rec, I believe.
It's rec, but
Yeah.
it's I didn't quite understand how that was private, but I guess it's different, as in it's not associated with PSB, and that's what makes it private versus public, right?
That's correct.
But right, okay. So clearly that one was a lower cost, and the Children's Center, and then Clinton Path and Apple Orchard were, significantly higher. And TC, is that how we pronounce the right? So to sort of Cliff's earlier note about cost, if we were going to do that, and I think Siddharth, if we were going to keep the levels, or once we figure out what we think our operating costs are, or down to our break even, there's certainly some space here if we wanted to raise tuition that would close that gap, or potentially change the ratio of where that break even was, just based on the numbers that we were able to pull out of all the documentation available. So that was a data point to kind of tie back into where we were on the prior set of info. The final piece that I'll just mention, and then we can go back to Q's and A's. This is the data that I got from Extended Day, which essentially shows we're operating at a loss. So there's 376K was our estimated FY26 cost. I think at this point, we probably know exactly what that cost is, but I'm just going to mention it was estimated in the data that I got, so I'll leave it that way. There's 30 kids enrolled. The annual cost is just 376 divided by 30. But based on what we're charging, which is currently $900 a month, and there's 10 months of extended day, we're 106K in the hole. That rate's going to go up to 1,100 next year, or is scheduled to, and then 1,300 in FY28. If if the costs don't change, then we'll actually break even or be plus 13.7. However, that's saying that the salary and benefit data is not going to change between FY26 and FY28, which we know it will. So ultimately, we're operating extended day at a loss. So clearly, we either need to raise that price to cover the costs, or we need to figure out some way to, some less expensive way to provide those services, which I don't quite know what the answer is to that. So at any rate, that sort of concludes all of the slicing and dicing, and then I had generated those couple thoughts and then the questions on the prior slide. But that's
So I
enough.
think
I'll kick it
Mariah,
back to you for.
yeah, Mariah had her hand raised. Do you still have a question, Mariah? I'm not sure if you, okay, why don't you go ahead and have my question.
First, Jeff, did you do a calculation that includes the extended day for just to show the cost per hour?
I tried to do that, but
Okay.
I had to I started unwinding the number of weeks, which I did over here. So here I ended up putting in the operating weeks, and I just didn't have a chance to pull all that out and then try to run it through for BEEP and for the Clinton Path. I think we might be able to get some other extended day costs, but those were the only two. So I just ran out of time on that one. So
I just want to point out a couple things, which is maybe people have already gotten this, but I'll just say it out loud, which is of all the Brookline programs, there's only one that's running with unionized staff, right? So that's the one thing as you think about what the cost per hour is. Now it's interesting to me that some of the other public schools are doing it for less, and I don't know if they have a different model. I'm sure Margaret could comment on that. I just don't know the answer about how it works, or if their districts see the value of preschool and see this as an investment, which makes sense too. I think what's particularly challenging for the parents who need the extended day service is that the cost structure for extended day is quite expensive. And so it sort of changes the hourly cost to go like this, and it becomes quite expensive. Your point, Jeff, about is there more room to go up here? When you add in, again, when you add in the extended day cost of BEEP, it really does change how you compare BEEP compared to some of the other in Brookline programs. So I just wanted to flag that as a true differential of like the extended day changes how this all comes together for people.
Yeah, and I'll try to unwind these last two columns, so at least the max cost for the year is what this was kind of meant to be, but I need to make a similar operating weeks type of a thing for the extended day part, and then make sure that it matches up with if there's a summer program and not a summer program, and then we can have that sort of cost. But again, it's I tried to do the by hour because then at least you knew, right?
Yeah.
Apples to apples, and it's tricky to dial it all the way down for that. So.
The other just last thing I wanted to say was I did find the regulations, and what the regulations say is if you have 20 students in a classroom, again, all of these are a classroom with one para and one teacher. So if you have 20 students in a classroom, no more than 5 can be students with disabilities. If you have 6 or 7 students in a classroom, you can have no more than, I believe it's 15 students total. So yes, so it's 25, no more, it's 50 to 75% still as we're thinking about it, roughly. It's 53% to 75%. So that is tied to what was in the memo, but the number of students actually drastically changes as you increase the students with disabilities. So
interesting.
I'm happy to share that reference with people if they want it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, my
go
question was around comparables. And I think that, I mean, if you look at, so I don't know anything about Apple Orchard. Clinton Path, I think, is very small, right? So then fundamentally, like their cost structure is just going to look different because they have absolutely no scale. So based on what I know about that particular school. And so, that might be, it's interesting. It's actually less expensive than I would have thought. So that's sort of an interesting side point. I wonder, I agree there's probably some upside potentially for raising prices, tuition, but I think it's probably somewhere in the 10 to 15% range. Like I think that people benchmark against other I think you just have to think about like how people think about the comparables on this. And I think some of the private, like I have no idea why Apple Orchard School is so expensive.
Clearly because it's awesome.
I mean, obviously, but
there's a picture of a horse on the front page on their website. Like, I mean, come on.
and what doesn't signify awesome if a picture of a horse,
All the rest had kids and theirs had a horse. So, you know, that means something. I don't know.
So they're raising equestrians, I guess. But anyways, I think that I agree that there's upside. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure how people consider this. When my kids were little, we were in Cambridge. They provided very inexpensive preschool, was $800 a month. And so I think people expect to pay less for a town program, and that's just, you know, a consideration. But even other town programs like Sewell is more expensive, and I wonder if that's a little bit of the ceiling that you have. And you know, something to consider. What's not here, what's not listed here is Bright Horizons, for example, which is outrageously expensive. And might be just another interesting data point because people do choose between those programs. I think the upside of a place like a Bright Horizons is that it operates all year round. And a lot of those other industrial preschools do, for lack of a better term, the sort of corporate, you know, preschools at scale. But they tend to be very expensive. So that is, if you do another turn of this, it might be worth putting in you know, Bright Horizons, and there's a couple of other companies like that are either regional, or I think Bright Horizons is the big national one that might want to add in here as a comparable. And I think people will probably expect BEEP to be to cost less. Although I think that there is probably upside from a tuition.
Yeah, these two, and this is the operating weeks column. These two are full year. Now no daycare is open 52 weeks, right? They always have shutdown weeks that they have. So I tried to miracle in a little bit of that.
Bright Horizons is open 52 weeks of the year.
What?
Yes.
That's nuts.
Bright Horizons specializes in like adjacency to hospitals, and like they run like 24 hours a day, and it's like, yeah.
It runs like 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Like
I think some of them run like 24 hours. I'm pretty sure. Yes, because people work nights. Yes. I'm not kidding you.
That's nuts.
I know, but people need childcare. So
yeah, fair enough, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so anyway, those were year long, and then I didn't go and dig super deep into the not that one, but these were more like run during the school year. So I tried to add that in, which of course factored into the cost per hour. But I can try to get some comp data on Bright Horizons. So
yeah, there's Bright Horizons. There's a handful in Brookline that I think are might just be worth benchmarking against.
Yeah, sure. I can
try to think of some of the names of the places that I don't know. It just as a sample.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll send you an email.
Okay. Cliff, Dick, I don't
Dick
know.
was first.
Dick,
Okay, thank you. Just following up on that, these operate, other than the two, the same number of weeks a year that the Brookline, that BEEP operates,
right?
Basically. And I'm not sure what parents do for the rest of the year, for the other 10 weeks out of the year, but it is an issue. The one thing that, as I look at this, makes BEEP particularly appealing compared to these other programs is how late the extended day program goes.
Yes.
And that is something that I think has to be valuable to parents who are not working from home, at least, who are commuting into Boston or commuting elsewhere. But going to 5:30 as opposed to even 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock
Oh
or
yeah, it's
2:45
huge. It's a huge
is a
difference.
significant difference. And having that option is something that I would think would be terribly valuable to at least a subset of the potential users of the BEAT program.
Yeah, I agree.
Jeff, how confident do you feel that your data here, though, is like that, for example, Trust Center doesn't offer post 3 p.m. care? Are you 100% sure?
Not 100%. And I did start to do a little deeper digging to try to pull some of the operating weeks data. And then while I was in there, other than being reminded that tuition varies per child's age, sorry. And also while we're here, we should add that usually you get a discount if you have siblings, which of course is almost impossible to model. But there were some extra extended day type references in some of the other daycares. I think TC was one of them, but I just didn't have time to go back and pull that out and try to update it. But I will do that and just try to keep honing this in on, finer and finer. But I do think there were a few other options. It didn't seem like there were very many though that went until 5:30 or 6. They did seem to, even if they had beyond 3 o'clock. They a few, by the way, also had a few early drop-off type hours as well, which sort of didn't get covered in the memo or any of that stuff, which can also be helpful. But I'll go back to at least these ones, and if we add other comps, and dig through their websites and see if I can just tune this up a little bit, and then dial it in as much as we can.
I just sent you one that
Oh,
has.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Cliff.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of curious what the extended day programs that are not at Lynch, that are run by extended day, what they charge and how this compares to them. I don't think there's a lot of utility or need to be including Wellesley, Natick, Needham, and Newton, because that is for families who live in those towns and go to those school systems, and to use them as comps, they're not an option for people who go to the Brookline school systems. So I just think they're sort of not relevant, and they tend to skew the information.
Yeah, that's
I
fair, but I
actually-
think it's a mental benchmark that people have that is helpful context. I mean, you're right. They can't make use of that service.
I am interested in understanding whether or not they have somewhat of a different model. And part of that is because, I just might not, I'm obviously not familiar enough or at all with the way the schools operate in these other municipalities to know whether or not they are running at with the same sort of structural deficit that our school system is. I don't hear about that from people I know who live in those municipalities, but I am curious. Because it's pretty interesting. I don't see how they can even come close to covering costs.
Yeah. That also jumped off the page to me as well. It seemed wrong. I was like, how is it
But
possible?
remember, like Wellesley's only running 4 days a week as one example. It's not a 5-day a week program.
True.
So,
True.
I'm not saying that's true for all of them. To answer your question, Cliff, I just sent you all the link to the Hayes. So Hayes is the only extended day in Brookline that runs extended day for preschool, and they charge $785. As of last year, they might have kept it steady. I'm presuming they did. So $785 for per month for a 5-day program for pre-K and K, comparing that to the $900 that we're charging this year, which is going to go up to $1,100 and then $1,300 in 2 years. So quite a different scale of costs and the difference again is is having, you know, I think a unionized staffing, and it just changes the pay scale and some of the other wraparound benefits. Although from what I know, the extended days these days are offering relatively strong benefits, paid time off, health and dental, I believe, because they need to be competitive to get the staffing that they need.
Sure, sure. They also, their cost structure also doesn't require them to uh, uh, have kids that, you know, they're legally required to have in the program, you know, that have special needs and therefore, you know, additional costs associated with them. So, I mean, they're comps, but they're not, just because of the cost
Well, the
structure.
extended day, though, like, first off, Hayes does do this, and they are legally required to.
So they're
Otherwise,
they're part of Brookline.
they're not part of Brookline, but it's basically part of, like, you can't be discriminating against participation. And so, and the extended days in general are trying to accommodate the students that are the population of the school. So it's not a perfect match, but you would in general expect to see that there are students who have additional needs who are attending the extended days as well. I guess I would say Hayes is more of a comp for the at least the extended day portion than you might think.
Interesting. Do they also have to have the same sort of ratio?
They're all EEC licensed, so I believe so. At least for the extended day portion, yes.
Okay.
Yep. They all operate under the same guidance.
So, Mariah, you had mentioned something to say. You had to step away for a second, so just you might want to email him separately. Dick, you have your hand raised, and then I would love to. It's 6:35, so I'd love to circle back to Jeff to just summarize some of the things you're gonna do as takeaways. When do you think you'd be ready to present another iteration? Just talk about next steps. So, Dick, go ahead.
So Jeff, I was wondering if you were surprised looking at the extended day estimated FY26 cost, the benefits at 180,000 versus salary of 196,000. Does that strike you as
Yeah.
curious?
Well, Mariah
As-
talked
as-
about that. We think it's four people, right? That make
Pretty
up
sure
that.
it's 4 people. And if you think about, you know, I believe health insurance is carried on averages, Dick. And so essentially, if that's like the cost of, you know, 83% of a family plan on the town, you know, plus their whatever else they have for benefits. When you think about for paras, the benefits are quite large compared to the salary.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's expensive. Well, that's my judgment. It's a lot
I
of
mean,
money.
that's if that's 4 people, that's okay. 45,000 in benefits per person.
I believe that they're running 2 classrooms in the afternoon with 2 paras in each of them. So I believe it's 4. And if you look at the salary, that's about right, of 4 times lower
Yeah.
40s.
Okay.
So it might be
Or
5,
49.
but I'm not, or a fractional another person, but yeah.
Yeah, that could be.
I mean,
Yep.
it's notable. It's notable.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, Jeff.
To be continued.
Yeah, to be continued. So actually this just raises one thing, Jeff, before we go to you. I know there were some questions around partial, part-time staff benefits, the cost of those benefits. And I don't think that anyone has that as something to take and maybe dig into further. Dick, I was wondering whether, given the work that you had done on healthcare, if this was something that actually, let me take a step back. There's a question about whether this is something we pick up just to surface some of that cost. And then if so, who would lead it? I think that it will probably come up in the context of other conversations, but it might be worth just surfacing as one of the challenges we have with either our current model or with our current benefits structure overall.
Yeah. Yeah, and it certainly could be a question that is posed. For example, Ann Braga said they had very few, the town side had very few part-time, quote unquote, benefited people. And I think that issue we could ask the schools that same question and see. So, as a
Okay.
starting
Cool.
point.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. All right. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, so I took a couple notes, while we were chatting, that I'll follow up on, and like I said before, and definitely want to say again, thank you to Mariah for all the extra time one-on-one that she's helped me figure out some of this stuff, and also Cliff helped me a little bit as well a few weeks ago. But I'll get that sort of piece that we were talking about, the quote unquote legal requirements that Mariah quoted, and then I'll feather that in just to keep it. And then of course, at some point we can write this up, assuming, to Cliff's earlier point, that we want to include this, and it isn't a short paragraph, it's a longer paragraph. But it sounds like we can get some of the data. The piece I really want is how much are we paying the staff to do this? Because to me that just makes more sense from a business bookkeeping standpoint. But if that data is in the budget book and we can get the number of teachers in classrooms, and certainly Mariah can help point me in that direction, awesome. Because then we can update those numbers and then look at essentially what we're charging and where we think that should go. And some of those other questions we were asking about the size, because it all really hinges on that. And then the final other bit was just, to double check if there's any circuit breaker reimbursements for BEEP. We think there aren't, but we can ask that. And then as far as, do you have your magical schedule, Siddharth, of all the meetings? Because that might help me with the scheduling piece.
I do. I'm flattered that you think it's magical.
It's evolved quite a bit. It started off as like, we're going to have meetings every Monday. And then all of a sudden now there's just great detail, and it's, so.
With highly compressed and possibly non-viable schedule, yes. All right. So what do you think is kind of
what I really could use is, well, let's see, 1.5, we have some other presentations. Is that what it's looking like?
Yeah, 1.5, I think, we'll do a follow-up to the budget review. I think that's going to be the bulk of the conversation. I don't expect teaching loads to take a ton of time, but who knows?
Okay. Yeah, something in the 1.5 or 1.12, I think. I don't know how long the middle school model, which is super interesting.
I think middle school model might be a meaty discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So either I would say, I mean, the 12th or the 20th. So let's see.
That's fine. Yeah, either of those is good. When I was sleeping during our meeting earlier, isn't the middle school model in the futures subcommittee, or is this like evaluate what they come up with and pull it into here?
So
sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, it was originally the future subcommittee, and I was trying to manage my meeting overload. And so Sergio kindly said I could address it here, and then we'd just keep the futures subcommittee up to date. And
wait, shouldn't that be the opposite, where if you're overloaded that he would take it? So
well, I had already signed up for this particular one, and of all the things on the list, this is the one I really want to do. So
gotcha. All right, that's fair. I mean, it's really interesting. So.
It is. It's super interesting. So so I wasn't willing to give it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Good. So sort of maybe for the 12th or the 20th, and we'll see how.
Yeah, we can dial it in.
Yeah, yep. We'll see how it evolves. All right. Good. Anything else from the group?
I sent in.
Jeff, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully this was helpful. I feel like it wasn't as awesome as it could be, but hopefully it was. So.
I sent an email requesting a distribution of PSB staff by FTE so like 0.1 FTE, 0.2 FTE, all the way up to 1.0 FTE.
Sweet.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So I asked if it was possible to easily produce. So we'll see how that goes. But I did request it as a data point.
Cool.
For the team.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.